I will just quickly introduce myself. Some of you I recognize already and know you from other places or from previous nanos, but my name is Sarra Cannon, and I am a local writer. I belong to the Heart of Carolina romance writers, but I'm also very active in Nano. I think this is my 7th NaNoWriMo. I've only won 4 of them. I did not win last year, but I had a newborn. And I didn't win the year before, but I was newly pregnant and I had pregnancy brain. So that is a real thing for those of you who've not had a child. I think it's still there 15 months after he was born. But I have 9 novels that are published, and they're all self-published. I just recently hit the milestone of 150,000 books sold. So this October, end of October, will actually be my 3rd full year of self-publishing. So that whole, it's been almost exactly 50,000 books sold a year. I sold a little bit more than 50,000 last year and a little less the year before. But it's been a journey, and it's been awesome. So you'll probably hear me, as we're talking about traditional publishing versus self-publishing, being a little bit biased towards self-publishing. So if you're traditionally published, I'm not trying to offend anyone. It's just, these are really the facts. And when I first started out, I kind of thought everybody can get published as long as you just keep trying, and it'll be easy, I'll get an agent. And I never thought it would be super easy, but I didn't think it would be as hard as it really is. Getting published is extremely difficult. So ever since self-publishing began and this new digital age with ebooks, the whole world has opened up for writers, and every person in this room can be published by December if you want it to be. All you have to do is finish your novel, get it formatted, and get it uploaded, and you can be selling books right away. My very first month that I started self-publishing, like I said, it was the end of October, so actually NaNoWriMo, I was writing the 2nd book in that series, and I got that book out December 20th. So you can finish a book, get it published in December if you really, really work your tail off. So I'm going to teach you a little bit about that today, about how to do it, but we're going to talk a little bit about how do you make that decision? Do I want to self-publish or do I want to traditionally publish? What do those two things mean? What do they entail? If you have questions along the way, I'll be glad to answer them. Like if I zoom past something and you say, wait a minute, what was that again? Feel free to raise your hand, but if we get stuck on too much discussion, I'll probably move forward. And I won't make you sit for 2 straight hours. We'll actually take a break, and we're going to do a small group thing. If you make sure you've got one of these, you'll see the little 5 goals that you've got for your own publishing, so you can be thinking about that as we talk. Like, what do I really want out of writing this novel? Do I want to publish it, and what do I want to get from that? So, self-publishing versus traditional publishing and how that affects your nano novel. First of all, let's just talk about what they are very briefly. Traditional publishing, in a nutshell, means your novel is published by a publishing house. They buy the rights from you to distribute that novel to bookstores, to ebook stores, and they give you usually either an advance or a contract that explains very specifically how your royalties will be paid out to you. So someone else buys your rights. You still technically own the copyright, but they buy the right to distribute that book from you. And usually that's a forever kind of thing. As long as they've got those rights or they've purchased them from you, they've got it forever. You can't ever self-publish that unless you get those rights back. Self-publishing is when you take that work that you made for yourself, you package it, you put a cover on it, and you publish it yourself. You retain all the rights. No one else can publish that book, and it's completely yours. Even if you upload it on Amazon, Amazon doesn't own that book. It's your book. They just are selling it for you, and they'll give you a royalty from those sales. And we'll talk about how much that is in a minute. Hybrid publishing is kind of the new thing, and it's a mix between traditional and self-publishing. When I first started 3 years ago, everyone said to me, don't self-publish, you're really going to kick yourself because you can't ever traditionally publish that novel if it was self-published. And that was kind of true back then. Agents would say, if you went to an agent and said, hey, I've self-published this book and I've sold 5,000 copies, they would say, oh, it's already exceeded its audience. You can't traditionally publish that now. No one's going to look at that, and they wouldn't talk to you. Oops. Oops. But now it's a completely different world, and it's going to continue changing. Now agents come to you, say, wow, look, your book was on the bestseller list. We want to sell this. How many of you, have you guys heard of Hugh Howey? He's a self-published NaNoWriMo person, and he's written several books, but his most famous is Wool. Simon & Schuster, one of the big 6 publishers, came to him last year and said, hey, we're going to give you, it was almost a 7-figure deal, but not quite, to publish that book. And you know what the kicker there was? Huge deal. He didn't have to give up his ebook rights. So he continues to make 70% on all of his $5.99 ebooks, and they just bought the print rights from him. So now you've got kind of separation. Now, there's only a handful of people who've gotten that kind of deal, but from what I've heard from agents, there's a lot more publishers open to this. So in the next couple of years, you could have tons of options. There's a lot of ways to make money there. So it's really groundbreaking. Bella Andre, if you ever see her books around, I don't know if she's been in NaNoWriMo before, but she's a romance author. She writes the Sullivan series, and she publishes all of her own books. But Harlequin bought, for a 7-figure deal, the rights to, I think, 5 of her books. And they've published them now internationally in print. So you find them in grocery stores, at CVS, Walmart, Target, everywhere. And she got $1 million-something from them for just the print rights, and she gets to retain all of her own e-publishing rights, audio rights, everything. So she's a multi-millionaire now, and that's possible now when it wasn't 2 years ago. Yes.
And just to say, part of the reason they want to keep their ebook rights is when you sign with a traditional publisher, usually your ebook percentage that you get from royalties is crap.
Yeah.
It's usually about 14%. And that's good. That's considered good.
Yeah, it used to be the same as print. We're going to talk about royalties in just a minute, but when you look at the difference between royalties, you've really got to start weighing how much money can I make either way. And of course, we're all artists. We all want to write books because we want to share our stories with people. I mean, that's wonderful, but we want to make money doing it. I mean, if you want to be able to quit your job, you got to make money so that you can do this for a living. And I think that's probably what most writers would like to do. It's your dream to do that. I can tell you a little bit about my money once we get to royalties, but I'm kind of an open book on this because for years, traditional publishers seemed like it was kind of rude. I mean, you wouldn't walk up to somebody who works at SAS and say, so what's your salary? So people didn't do that in traditional publishing either. You didn't say, oh, what did you get for your book? So there was a lot of, because there's no baseline, like you start at SAS, you kind of know you might be starting at $50,000 a year. Well, you start out as a writer, some people are making the $3,000 advance, some people are getting $300,000. There's no baseline, so a lot of people were going around going, I don't know if this is a good deal or not, and a publisher offers you 10 grand and you don't know if that's amazing or if it sucks. So now a lot more people are being open about what they're making, and that's a huge thing, so we'll talk about money too. But basics about traditional, you've got the big 6, which now has kind of become the big 5. If you're not familiar with them, you are familiar with them. Simon & Schuster, which we've all heard of, HarperCollins, Macmillan, which also includes like St. Martin's Press. You've got Hachette, which is like Grand Central, and then you've got Random House, which we all know like Little Brown and some of those subsidiaries, and then you've got Penguin. And recently, Random House and Penguin joined, so now we kind of say the big 5, and everybody really wanted them to be Random Penguin, but they chose not to name them. You've also got, I mean, the big 6 is where you're going to get the biggest distribution. Okay. You're going to get the biggest kind of bang for your buck. I mean, those are the people that are offering 30, 50 grand for your advances and stuff. So that's where the big money is, to get in with one of the big 6 or the big 5. So you've got small indie publishers too, though. You've had that for years, where they've got some distribution. They may not be in Target or Walmart. They may not be able to get your books there, but they're going to probably get your books in Barnes & Noble if your book seems interesting. And they do have some distribution, but you're not going to usually get a very big advance from them. And now, kind of a new thing is you've got digital first imprints, which, like Random House, for example, has a new digital first imprint called Flirt. And they're pulling new adult, which is like college-age romances. Like some of you picked up that Trouble with Goodbye bookmark that has a free download code for me. That's a new adult romance. So they're purchasing things like that. And instead of getting them into bookstores, they're splitting royalties about 50-50 with you. You don't get an advance. They split 50-50, and then they take on all the costs of it, and they put a cover on it, they market it, they put them up online only, so your ebook only. And then what they're saying, these are all new, but what they're saying is if you sell a bunch, you have a chance of getting into print as well. But I'm going to tell you why I wouldn't personally sign a digital first imprint contract when we talk a little bit more about that. With self-publishing, what we're talking about primarily is ebooks. 150,000 copies that I've sold, probably 10 of them have been print-on-demand copies, and I'm not exaggerating. Most of what you're going to sell as a self-published author is ebooks, unless you can also go print-on-demand, and this is kind of old-school self-publishing. People used to buy a warehouse worth of books. You could buy like boxes and boxes, go to all the different bookstores in your area. Like, I have a friend who wrote a romance that's kind of a coastal romance where there's horses and stuff like that, set on the North Carolina coast. So she took a trip with her family, and they went to every little indie bookstore along the coast of North Carolina and got them to consignment sale her print-on-demand books. But, you're talking about those bookstores aren't going to buy 1,000 books from you. They're going to buy 2, maybe. And they might not even buy them. They're going to take them, and if they sell them, they'll give you 20% or 50% or however much your deal is. It's a lot of legwork. It works. Some people have really made a lot of money at it. There's nothing wrong with it if you want to do it. My cousin writes Savannah romances, and she does book signings. She hired a company, and she goes to tea. She does tea parties, and she signs books, and she sells them for $25 each. And she only pays through CreateSpace, I think $4.95, $5 a book. And so she's making $20 a person, but she's spending all day, every day, Saturday and Sunday, going from town to town to town. And she confided in me recently with the marketing company, with the cost of the books, with the cost of the travel, all that, she's still hasn't made her money back. And it's been 2 years since she started doing that, so it's a hard road. Ebooks, you finish it, you upload it, you move on, and you start bringing in royalties immediately. So ebooks are really where it's at. Are there any questions so far about what the differences are between self-publishing and traditional publishing? Okay. Advantages to traditional publishing. Print distribution to major bookstores. This is the #1 advantage still. It used to be, they used to have a little bit more advantages, but now print distribution to these major bookstores is the #1 thing. You're not going to walk into a Barnes & Noble and find one of my books on the shelf. You can walk in and order one of my books, but you're not going to find it, and that's how a lot of people browse for books. They walk in, there's this big thing that says, oh, look, bestsellers, or there's end caps, and you walk through and a cover catches your eye, you buy it. That's how print has been sold for years. You're not going to get that as a self-published author, not right now. Hugh Howey got it, though, and Bella Andre got it. Someday, maybe I'll get it, too. But it's possible, but you still have to go through those traditional publishers to get there. I'm really hoping that someday Barnes & Noble will wake up and say, hey, look, we've got these people selling on the Nook, and they've sold 50,000 copies. Let's print on demand their books straight from them. Will it ever happen? Who knows? Right now, no. You have to get a traditional deal to get into a major bookstore. Access to the publisher's resources, so they're going to come up with your cover, they're going to come up with your title, they're going to come up with the editing, they're going to tell you what you have to do. Now, this is kind of an advantage and a disadvantage, because a lot of times, especially as a new author, you don't have any say. So you may say, oh, I really wanted this book to be called Smashed. And they're like, oh, no, let's call it Daisy on a Chain. And you have no choice about that. They tell you what your title is. They tell you what the cover is. My friends who write for Harlequin, they don't even know what their cover looks like until the book comes out. So you don't have a lot of control. But at the same time, those publishers know what they're doing. They've been selling books for a long time, so you don't have to make that decision. It's a lot of pressure when you say, what do I want this cover to look like? So it depends on your personality and your own goals. But you get their editors, you get their cover artists, you get their marketing. And that's a big push behind you, especially if they believe in your book and they really want to put a lot of money behind it. That can make you a star. It has made stars before. The majority of people, though, aren't going to get that huge push, so just keep your eyes open. If you get approached by a publisher, make sure you ask those questions. Am I going to have say in my cover? Am I going to, do I get final say on edits? Are you going to take my input? What kind of marketing am I going to have? Because you can put that in your contract, exactly what kind of marketing push they're going to put behind you. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. You get career guidance from both your agent and from your editor. They're going to say, hey, let's make this a series of, instead of 3 books, let's make it 5 books. And maybe if you go off on this space opera tangent, that's really hot right now. Maybe you should do that because you've got a great voice for it. So you've got somebody else kind of telling you, hey, I know how to sell books. Let me guide you. you don't get that as much with self-publishing unless you seek it out. I put ego boost on here because I really think it is true. This is an advantage to traditional publishing. If I go and I tell someone, hey, I'm an author, they want to know who I'm published by, if they can walk into a bookstore and find me. They don't know that I've sold 150,000 copies, and they don't care. They just know I'm self-published, and they kind of go, oh, that's sweet. Because anybody can self-publish, right? I mean, anybody can do it, so there's nothing that says I'm any more successful than anyone else. So there's that kind of validation that comes with being able to say, I'm published by Random House. I mean, it does still mean something, whether you want to admit it or not. It means something to your family. If you go back home on your 20th high school reunion or 30th or whatever, and you say, I'm published by Random House, that does still mean something to your ego. Now, you may only be making $10,000 a year, but they think you're making a lot more. So it's all about what your personal goals are. Also, the publisher assumes all those costs, so you don't have to pay for your cover art out of pocket. And a lot of times they'll do stock photos, but a lot of times they're doing custom photo shoots for you that would cost thousands of dollars. They assume all that cost, and if your book doesn't make any money, they're the ones who lose the money. So it is a trade-off. Now, they may not publish your next book, though. So it's a trade-off all the way around, but at least you're not paying much out of pocket or anything out of pocket. If a publisher comes to you and says, we'll publish your book, but we need you to pay $5,000 for your cover art and whatever, that person is not a publisher. They are a scam artist. So don't ever go to anyone who makes you pay to publish your novel. It's not good. Disadvantages to traditional publishing is it's really difficult, especially in this day and age, to get a contract. It's just not something that you can do very easily. I've known people, it took them 15 years to get a contract. Now, you might be one of the lucky ones who gets a contract right away, but it's hard. So just, if you want to go traditional publishing and it's where your heart is, just be prepared that it might take years. Low royalties, so that's what we were just kind of talking about. I'm going to actually break those down a little bit, but on print, you're talking 6, maybe even 5 to 7%, and then out of that 7%, you're also paying, if you have an agent, which you usually have to get a publishing contract, they're getting 15% of your 7%. So it's not a lot of money, usually, and you have to earn that money back, so it's kind of like a loan. They're giving you 15 grand or whatever, but you've got to earn that money back in sales before they pay you a dime. So the royalties are low, and then you think, oh, ebooks probably a lot higher. It's really not. 13.5%, 17.5%, those are the typical royalties that you get for ebooks. Except if you do a digital first thing where you're usually getting 50%, but like I said, you're not getting an advance, and they're not putting you in bookstores. So there's a trade-off there as well. Long time to market. If I sold my book today to a publisher, you guys wouldn't see that book until at least next summer, and that would be a miracle. It would probably be next fall or winter. I saw someone recently on Twitter was saying, oh my gosh, I got a book deal, and they were super excited. And I was like, oh wow, when's your book coming out? Winter 2015. February 2015. I'll probably have another 6 books out by then. It's a long, long process. Limited amount of books to publish in a year. A publisher isn't going to let you publish 6 books a year your first year. It's just not going to happen. They don't have the money or the resources to dedicate 6 books to you. Now, if you're Nora Roberts, this is maybe a different story. But for most people, it's such a long time to market, they're not going to be able to produce 6 books a year. One exception might be Harlequin. If you really got in with Harlequin, you might be able to put out 3 or 4 or 5 books a year because they do have fast publishing schedules, but no one I know that writes for Harlequin gets that many books. You also have a loss of control. So like I said, with the cover artists, you get their cover artists. You don't get to choose those things, like I said, so you lose a lot of that creative control. For example, in The Trouble with Goodbye, the book that you guys got a free download code for, if they had said to me, I really need this to be more about the romance, I want them to meet in, every single scene, they've got to be together in every scene. You can't have any scene with her outside of him. I would have had to change that, or we would have had to fight over it, and I could have lost my contract over it. you can't choose everything about your story, even if you can go to them and say, hey, this is the way this book needs to be. She's got to be with her mother. She's got to be with her friends. She's got to be over here. This is the way the book needs to be. They can say, that's not what we want you to write. They've got to be together in every scene, and they really can tell you that. So you lose a lot of control. There's also more pressure to perform, because if you don't sell a lot of those books, and they've put out, especially if they've put out a huge advance on you, they're probably not going to buy your next book. Even if, let's say you've got a 10-book series planned, and they bought a 5-book contract from you for hundreds of thousands of dollars. You get to book 3 and you haven't sold but 3,000 or 4,000 copies of each book. They're just going to say, well, forget the rest of those books. You get to keep your advance, but they're not going to publish those books, and they don't really care that your fans have already, you've got 2,000 fans. So there are a lot of advantages, but there are a lot of disadvantages. Now, advantage to self-publishing I could talk about forever, because I love self-publishing. It's amazing. Extremely fast time to market, like I said. I started writing Beautiful Demons, which was my first book, in September of 2010. Published it in October. Wrote book 2 for Nano that year in November. Published it December 20th. My third book came out February 20th. So I had these books as fast as I could write them and get them edited, which Jen helped me a lot with that. She was my critique partner at the time. As fast as I could write them, I could get them out. So fast to market, because I don't have to write a 100,000-word book. Beautiful Demons was only 47,000 words. Inner Demons was maybe 52,000 words. It was a nano novel, and I published it because nobody can tell me how long it can be or how long it has to be. High royalties, we'll talk about that again soon, but 70% is what I make on the majority of my sales. So for a $2.99 book, I'm getting $2.09, which is a lot of money. A $2.99 book from Harlequin, you're not even going to be making 30 cents a book in comparison. You can publish, you have complete control of your novel. Some people say this is a disadvantage because it's all about you, and all the pressure's on you to make all the right decisions. But it's great because you can change things. If you don't like that cover, or it's not responding, and you get a lot of reviews that say, oh, I just don't like the girl on that cover, you can change it. You can have it uploaded and changed by, it's 2:30, you can have it changed by 3:30. If you could design a new cover, you can get it changed. And you can change your title, you can upload a new copy of the book, everything. You have complete control over how your book is written, what you write, what genres you go in. You have all the control. And you can publish as many books as you want a year. If you want to publish a book a month, go for it. If you want to write 10,000-word short stories and publish them, every 2 weeks, you can do that. And there are people that make a lot of money doing that. You can write, if you wanted to write a 300,000-word book, traditional publishing doesn't usually let you write 300,000-word books. But if you want to do it, you can do it, and you can sell that book for $19.99. It's totally your choice what you want to do. You can experiment, like I said, with length. You can experiment with storylines. You can experiment with genres. You can take as many risks as you want to take. I think the only rules out there that Amazon has is no incest. You can do pseudo-incest, but not real incest. There's no rules. I mean, you can really write it however you want to write it. And that's a huge freedom compared to what you get with traditional publishing. The disadvantages are decisions. I feel like I'm a professional decision maker because that's what I do all day, every day, all the time. And sometimes it does get to be overwhelming. What do I want the cover to be? What do I want the title to be? Should I write another young adult book, or should I write a new adult book? But I kind of want to write this fantasy over here, but is that going to hurt my career? Should I market here? I mean, there's probably like constantly bubbles of questions all around my head all day long. It gets to be a little bit overwhelming because you are the one making your own decisions. If you're really bad at making decisions and you would stare at a carpet swatch for like 12 days without being able to make a choice, self-publishing may not be for you because you have to make these decisions, and they determine your choice. Oh, that didn't sound right. They determine your path. So I actually made a bad decision because I finished my young adult series, and I stupidly thought that, okay, I've got all these fans, they're going to follow me to whatever I write. So I wrote the book that you guys saw on the card, Trouble with Goodbye. New genre, it's not paranormal, it's not young adult, but I thought, my fans will still love it because it's me writing it. No. And so then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to finish this book I wrote for Nano in 2009, I think. Yeah. And I'm going to get that one out there because it's still young adult. It's a little different. I think I've sold 450 copies of that book, which isn't bad, but it's not what I was expecting. So my fans didn't follow me. You know what my fans want to read? That first series. The first series I started, that's what they want to read. I have a new novella coming out in a couple of weeks in that series, and people cannot wait for it. Do they care about the other 3 books I've put out since then? No, they don't. not really. I mean, they're not selling bad, but they're not anywhere near what that other thing was. So really, now I've started myself on 2 other series that aren't even that main series, and now I'm kind of diluting my own audience. So I made a bad decision. I can change that. I can write now what I want to write, but now I do have some people waiting for this book and this book and this book. So I kind of spread myself too thin. And now I have to live with those decisions. There's no publisher going to share the blame with me. It's just me living with that. Yes?
Have you considered a pen name for that offshoot or that other genre?
It really wouldn't help. I mean, having pen names are a good question. Most people I know use pen names. It just makes them even more obscure. At least using my same name, people know who I am. It's not that they don't like the books. It's just they like Harper and Jackson. They want to read about Harper and Jackson. Until I've got 3 or 5 books out in this next series, they're not going to be attached to it. And we're going to talk about that when we kind of talk about what how that affects your Nano novel. But readers, especially when you're talking about indie publishing, but really it's true for traditional publishing too, readers like series. They want a lot of content. They want to read about these same 2 characters, if it's a romance, or this same, think about Firefly. How many of you have seen that show and wished it would have gone on forever? People would watch a show about Kaylee and Mal. I mean, they would watch that over and over and over. And if you were writing books about that team on Firefly, you would write those same characters. Well, yes, Joss Whedon can go and do Dollhouse, but it's not going to take off to the same people. You know what I'm saying? Yes, they're going to love it because it's Joss Whedon and he's doing these amazing types of things. But if they loved Firefly, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to love Buffy too. Does that make sense? You're going to have 2 kind of different audiences, and you will have some crossover. I do have a lot of crossover. But I just put out the 2nd book in this series, the Fairhope series, The Trouble with Goodbye, and The Moment We Began as the 2nd book. And once I put out book 2, I've got more people that were my fans buying book 1. Book 3 comes out in December. That's what I'm going to write for Nano this year. I'm gonna see, I know, a lot more people buying those first 2 books. Not because it's me, but because there's 3 books now. Does that make sense? With traditional publishing, it would be the same, but it would take you 3 years to get those 3 books out rather than you could publish them all in 1 year. I put the first book in May, the 2nd book came out just a few weeks ago, and the 3rd one will come out in December. So I've got a lot faster fan base growth because I can put the books out faster. It also means you have to write them faster, though. But we're all in Nano, right? So we're up for the challenge. There's no, pressure to publish often. So before I said there's pressure to perform with traditional publishing. You've got this one book that has to do really great. Well, with self-publishing, especially once you kind of get in the community and you start to see all of those people who are publishing a book a month, you start to really feel the pressure of, oh my gosh, I should be writing faster, I should be putting more out there, because look at her, she's making $20,000 a month and I only made $1,000, and help. And so you start feeling like you have to really publish really fast. Bella Andre, that I was talking about, had the $1 million deal with Harlequin. She puts out a book a month almost, and that's what she does all the time. She was saying at RWA conference, she doesn't really see her children as much, So you have to decide what's more important to you. It doesn't mean you have to. Until this year, I had 6 books out, so almost 3, so 9 books. I have 9 books now. I've been doing this 3 years. That's only 3 books a year. You don't have to put out 12 books a year, but you just feel the pressure all the time to put more out. Especially the way things work on Amazon, you have something called a 30-day cliff. So once you put a book out, you're kind of on their hot new release list and that sort of thing. 30 days after, you fall off the cliff. If you've self-published anything, you know what I'm talking about. You could be up in the 500s of Amazon. You're selling 30 to 50 books a day. And then that 30 days come and it's the way their algorithms work. It's all very mysterious. But that 30 days comes and you're going to immediately see a jump, probably. Unless you've got some kind of ad or you've got a new book out, you're going to start falling. You're going to be 1,000 tomorrow, 1,200 the next day, 1,300. And before you know it, a couple months from now, if you don't have a new book out, you're going to be in the 20,000s, 50,000s, 150,000s. And that's just the way it is. So you're going to, as you see those rankings fall, you're going to think, oh my gosh, I got to get another book out. And that pressure can be difficult. When you have a publisher, they're sharing that load, and they don't tell you how your sales are doing, so you don't really know. So you live in La La Land, maybe. You also get no distribution to bookstores. We already kind of talked about that. Sometimes it can be a little bit lonely and overwhelming because you don't have career guidance. You don't have an agent telling you what the best choice is. You don't have someone saying, no, keep writing Peachville, that's what everybody wants to read. So you make your own decisions, and sometimes you fail, and that's part of the disadvantages to it. The advantage on the flip side of that is, like I said, you can change your path. I can put out this novella that's related to Peachville and keep my fans interested. I'm starting a second Peachville series starting probably March. Hopefully that will also take off. So you can always make changes, and you can continually adapt. But it does sometimes feel a little bit lonely with no guidance. And another disadvantage is you pay for everything out of pocket. You pay, if you need an editor, you pay for that. If you need a cover artist, you pay for that. If you want to upload to Mac or to the iTunes store, you either have to buy a Mac or you have to pay time or pay someone else to upload for you. There are, most of the vendors are free, but Mac is sort of not free in a roundabout way. But, you know, all that stuff comes out of your pocket, so you have to think about that. Now, on the advantage side of that, you could pretty much do it for almost free. There are places that have pre-made covers online, like cover artists that are trying to get your business that kind of put a sampling of pre-made covers, and all you have to do is buy it for like sometimes $15 a cover if you get them on sale, and they'll put your title and your name on it. So $15 for a cover. You can learn how to format yourself, and if you can't, you can pay someone. Like my husband charges $30 to format a book. There are some people who only charge $15. So you can find someone to do these things instead of like me. Instead of using an editor, you can use a critique group, a group of peers that you met. We all met at NaNoWriMo back in 2009. Yeah. So we met. We started working together, and we critiqued each other's novels, and that was my editor. So you can find ways to do things inexpensively. And I actually did really cheap covers for the first 3 books, and then once I started making money, I upgraded. And you can do that. You can change the whole look of your series. So you do pay for everything out of pocket, but my advice would be don't pay for anything until you've made, don't pay a lot of money until you've made a lot of money. I have another friend who won the Golden Heart, if you know what that is, for RWA, for YA several years back, and she couldn't sell that book, so she decided she was going to launch it, and she was going to put everything she could behind it, and she spent $2,600 editing, cover art, and all this. And what do you imagine? Do you think she hit the New York Times with that book? No, nobody hits the New York Times with their first book. It very, very rarely ever happens. And she put a lot of money behind that, and now she's really depressed about it because she wanted that book to be a bestseller. Well, one of the secrets of self-publishing, especially self-publishing, is the more books you have out, the better you're going to sell. I'm selling more books at 9 books out than I was at 3 books out, and that's the way it's going to be for almost everyone. So what I'm saying is don't spend all your savings on your first book, because you're probably going to need 3 to 5 books before you really start seeing a lot of money coming in. So now we'll talk royalties. Does anybody have any questions? You guys need to stretch or anything? We good? We're good? Okay. Traditional publishing royalties. Print, 7% is probably more the high end. I know some people only get 5%. So let's say 7% on a hopeful day. Hardcover, I think, is more. But a lot of people don't get hardcover deals, so we're just going to ignore that. Plus, you don't get a huge print run on a hardcover. Ebooks, 13%. I think is kind of starting to go away a little bit more. We're kind of averaging more like 17.5%, but you still will see 13.5%, 13% on some contracts to 50%. But like I said, that higher end is usually they're not paying you in advance. So just be aware of that. In comparison, self-publishing royalties, print, it depends because you set your own price. So the royalties kind of vary a little bit as far as, I mean, if they're going to charge me at CreateSpace $5 to buy one of my copies, and I want to sell it for $10, you know, I get that 50% royalty. If I want to sell it at a Nano event and I only want to charge $6 for it, I'm only going to make $1 off of it. So you kind of set your own math there. They give you a specific cost, and then you bump it up however much you want. Ebooks, but like I said, print books for self-published authors in this day and age is usually negligible earnings unless you really go that extra mile to get yourself into indie bookstores or book signings and that sort of thing. And if you're interested in that, I'm not the kind of person to talk to. John might be better to talk to because he's done some more of that print type deals, but for me, it's been almost nothing. But I do have a CreateSpace book here so you can see. And one of the Nano things they're doing this year for CreateSpace is 2 free copies. If you win Nano this year, you get 2 free CreateSpace copies of your book. Yay! And they're good. They're good. They feel good. This is a 120,000 word book, so you can kind of see what size I put on it and how I did. My husband did the formatting on this, but I'll just pass it around. You can take a look at the quality of it. But it's good. I mean, other than the fact that you can't do a matte cover at CreateSpace, it's got to be this kind of glossy. They look great. They really do. And you'll see that if you win Nano. I highly recommend you do. Then you get those 2 free copies of your book to check it out. And they'll give you like a PDF template so that you can just paste your book inside. CreateSpace, which is Amazon's print on demand. And you can find a link in the forums to them. I know that Grant put some stuff up there yesterday. And I think CreateSpace is actually featuring me as their indie author this year. Yay! Ebooks is where the money is at. Your royalty on ebooks depends on 2 things. It depends on what vendor you're talking about. So are you talking about Amazon or Kobo or Barnes & Noble, because they all have their own royalty structure. Or the other thing is what did you price your novel at? At 99 cents, all across the board, that's going to be your lowest royalty. They don't want you to price your book at 99 cents and make 70% of that sale, because they're not going to make much money either. So if I price my book at 99 cents at Amazon, I get 35% royalty, which is basically 35 cents a book. Still not bad, guys. When you talk about what used to happen with traditional publishing, 35 cents is still a lot of money per sale. At Barnes & Noble, it's 40%. I have this stuff on my website, so if you didn't take a card or whatever, actually, I think I put it on the sheet on the back. Yeah, on the very back of your sheet in pink, it says sarracannon.com on the very, very back. That's my website, and on there, there's a lot of like walkthroughs on. I even took screenshots of how to upload to the various vendors. A lot of information there for you, and part of it talks about what the royalties are to each of these vendors. But at Barnes & Noble, it's 40%, so you get 40 cents for a 99-cent book there. I think at Kobo they recently changed it, but I can't remember what they changed it to. But it's all in that same basic range. That's for anything from 99 cents to $2.99 or $2.98. $2.99 to $9.99 is your sweet spot. That's where you're going to make most of the money. So that's why when you see a lot of indie books, they're priced at $2.99, because that's the first and lowest you can set your price and still make 70%. So the majority of my books are priced at $2.99, and I make $2.09 a copy at Amazon because I make 70%. Barnes & Noble only pays you 65%. I think Kobo pays you 75%. Smashwords, I think, pays you 85%. And Apple is somewhere around the 70% as well. So you get that basic idea that you're going to make about between $1.95 and $2.10 per copy that you sell. Comparing the two, let's just take an example. So one of my most recent young adult books is called Death's Awakening. I wrote this for Nano 2009 and then went back recently and edited it and published it to July 4th. It came out this year. That's my book that's only sold 400-something copies. If it was traditionally published, just looking at a time to market and all the different things, 6 months to a year, 6 months is pretty much unheard of. That's if they really believed in this book and, man, we got to get it out because Brad Pitt's going to be in a zombie movie and let's get it out. to a year, maybe even sometimes I've heard if there's a lot of edits, extensive edits, I've heard people not getting their book out till 2 years later. So let's say average good side YA advance is about $15,000. Now you have to subtract your 15% for your agent because you're not going to get $15,000 advance without an agent. It means I take home $12,750. That sounds pretty good for your book. But then you think about the fact that you get that money, and that's the only money you see for at least a year before your book comes out. And that's it. Unless you sell another book, that's all you're going to see. Then that book comes out, and now you have to earn that money back. And not the $12,750, you have to earn the $15,000 back. So a typical print run, I think, a pretty good print run, is about 5,000 books. And I'm just throwing numbers out for an example. A YA book about like the one you guys are holding would probably be about $14.99, between $9.99 and $14.99, but I'm going to go the high end just to give it better numbers. If I get that 7% royalty, I'm making $1.05 a book. At $5,000, if they all sold, every single book, so this is the best case scenario, I make $5,250. I have not earned a penny past what I earned a year and a half ago when my book was first sold. So that's pretty discouraging. At least it was to me when I first started looking at the numbers. But your ebook comes out too, so here's where maybe you can make your money back. Except that most traditional publishers are going to price your book at $9.99 an ebook. And people like paying $2.99 for ebooks. I've heard a lot of people don't like paying more than $5 for an ebook. And right now, as the market is right now, traditional publishers are not pricing their books that low. So $9.99. If you get that 17.5% royalty, you're making $1.70 for a book. So readers are paying $9.99, and the author is making almost 40 cents less. If you really take a look at those numbers. So you would need to sell an additional about 5,600 ebooks just to earn out your advance. So at this point, you've already sold over 10,600 books, and you still haven't earned a penny. So it's hard numbers. It's really hard numbers. If you self-publish that book, your time to market, if it's done and it's edited and you have a cover, is less than 24 hours. Maybe on a bad day, Barnes & Noble might take three days or 4 days to put your book up because they're having some glitches or something, but less than a week to get your book up. You upload it. It's a very simple little form you fill out. You upload your book. It's done. Like I said, I finished Nano, edited the book, and got the book out in 20 days. And that was with a critique group reading every word of it. So time to market is super, super fast compared to a year. Now, also what I didn't mention with the traditionally published books is even if you did, let's say you sold those 10,600 books and then you sold another 5,000 on top of it, and yay, you just made another, $6,000 to $10,000. You're not going to see that money in 60 days after you made the sale. You're going to see that money 6 months to a year after that sale was made. And they're not going to tell you you made those sales until they send out their, some pay quarterly, most pay twice a year. So come June, you'll find out that you sold 1,000 books in January, and then they pay you in December.
And they hold some for returns.
And they hold some for returns. That's right. So, you made 10 grand, but hey, we're going to actually hold 2,500 back because we're estimating that people are going to return those books, and you're going to have to pay for that. It's depressing, to be honest. And I'm sorry if anybody just feels disillusioned. Or do you guys feel like you already knew that this is the way traditional publishing worked? Is anybody kind of like, oh, crap? Because that was me 3 years ago. I thought, oh, I'm going to make so much money. I thought authors made millions, It's a tough world. I'm not saying it's not worth it, exactly, but I'm saying it's hard. If you want to go traditional publishing route, it is very, very hard. It's a hard road. But as we know, we wouldn't have heard of Nora Roberts if it wasn't for that. And she does make $60 million something a year. James Patterson makes $90 million a year. I think he made $86 million last year. It does happen, but it's just for the mid-list person, the person like me who's selling, 50,000 books a year or less. You're not gonna. It's going to be a much harder road. You're not going to be a millionaire off of that. Self-publishing, time to market is 24 hours. The ebooks you can price as low as $2.99 and make a 70% royalty. So you're making $2.09. So you need to sell, math-wise, I guess that kind of cut off, 7,177 copies to earn that $15,000. Now, one of the difference in the money-wise of that is I have to sell 7,000 copies of that book, but I can also put 6 more books out this year if I want to. So you have a lot more potential to make that kind of money. You're talking just barely over 500 copies of that one book a month. I've never sold 10,000 books a month, ever. And last month I sold 9,600 and I was so close. But, I mean, last month alone, The Trouble with Goodbye sold 7,000 copies in 1 month. If that gives you kind of an idea. Now, I'm not saying I made $15,000 off of it, I wish, but I dropped the price to 99 cents, so I only made 6,000 or something, something. But that's still a lot of money in 1 month. And you have the freedom as a self-published person to say, hey, I'm going to drop the price to 99 cents and see if I can sell a bunch of books. But all of my Peachful books have sold at least 10,000 books each. The second book sold over 30,000. So when you start talking money, I could have never sold that many traditional publishing. You know why? Because they would have priced it at $9.99. They would have given me a small print run, and I only would have had 1 book out a year. So by now, I would only be up to book 3. So it probably wouldn't have even caught on yet. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to depress anyone. I'm just saying, really look at it, because the exciting side of that is you can do this all yourself and you can make a lot more money than you could have made if you were traditionally publishing it. But again, this is my bias, so if you disagree, that's fine too. Yes?
Well, I'll just point out that you're a good writer and you're a good storyteller. And I think that is very important in the conversation here.
Yeah, and they don't. Yes,
skills.
If you look at I think people throw around some statistic that says something like the average self-published author will never sell more than 100 copies. I don't know, that it changes all the time. Sometimes they say no more than 100 copies a year or no more than 100 copies a lifetime. I mean, who knows? But there's a lot. Don't listen to those statistics, because they're not real statistics. They're just people throwing numbers out there that don't really mean anything. Yes, a lot of self-published authors will not do great. But you know what? Let's say that Sarra Cannon is not, able to produce a lot of books all at once. I can only write 1 book a year, and it's my nano book, and that's all the time I have. I can either try for the next 10 years to traditionally publish that book and maybe hope to make $5,000 off of it, and then they hold the rights for it the rest of their lives, or the rest of my life. Or I can self-publish that book, and I can sell 100 copies a year, and I could be making, if I want to put that book up at $4.99, I could be making $3-something $100 every year off that book. And that's a lot better than never getting a contract. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like if you're comparing them to each other, it's better to at least have it out there, at least give it a chance, than it is to continue to query agents who are just never going to give you a contract or get you a contract with an editor. Does that make sense? At least you're giving yourself a fighting chance. And you know what? I don't know if you guys have heard of Darcy Chan. She only has really 1 book out. I think she might have a novella, and then she's got a new book coming out in March, traditional published, I don't know why. But she wrote a book called The Mill River Recluse, and it's kind of a literary fiction mystery. She did spend quite a bit of money on advertising for that book, but she sold something like 5 million copies. And it's only 1 book. And your nano book could be a book like that. I cringe and say Death's Awakening has only sold I think it's actually up to 500 or 600 copies after last month. So let's say I've sold 500 copies of that book. Well, that's since July. I mean, I really shouldn't be so hard on myself, because that's 500 copies of a book. I've made $1,000 off that book. I think I actually spent more than I should have on the cover, so we won't talk about that. But let's say I used my normal cover artist and only spent $60 on that cover, and I didn't use an editor except for as a proofreader, a final proofreader. So I spent $100 getting that book to market, and I've made $1,000.
What is the market for that book?
It's a young adult.
I mean, well, not just that, but I mean, is it global? Is it available globally?
It is available globally, but only online. So, but yes, you can get completely globally. Now, Amazon is opening more and more stores. So this year, I think they've opened India, Mexico, Brazil, France. I think France opened last year. They have a store in Germany and so forth. So you don't see a ton. You see a lot more sales in Canada and the United States and the UK, more than anywhere else. But It's different in the Apple Store. In the Apple Store, you're selling books in Uganda and New Zealand, and it seems like I had a sale in Zimbabwe the other day. It's a much more global market in iTunes and on Kobo. Kobo, you see a lot more international sales. I have some friends that are doing extremely well. I have a friend of mine, Robert Crane, is selling more books in the UK than he does in the US, and he's making $40,000 a month.
And
I wish I was there.
Clear, when you say that you retain the rights to your book and you do publish, that means that you are able to put your book on all of these markets.
Yes, and you can also, if you want to, this is something kind of like the hybrid publishing, you can sell your book in print to someone in Germany, and you retain the rights here to print it in the United States. So I know several people who have sold their foreign rights for print, and that usually those print deals in foreign countries are actually better than here because they only do it for a certain period of time. So they may buy the rights to print and distribute your book only for the next 5 years, but they translate it, they take over all the costs, and they may give you $5,000 or $10,000 for that book, and it's just money in your pocket, and you won't usually see royalties from that. But hey, $5,000 to sell it in Germany in print, woo, I would take it in a heartbeat when nobody's offered it to me. But I mean, you can do that, and several agents now are taking on self-published authors just to get them those kinds of foreign rights, because you can hold on to your local rights. All those rights can be separated, is what I'm trying to say. But if you want to, you can even, and Tina Folsom is someone else who also spoke at RWA. She writes not German romances, but vampire romances, but she's German speaker, so she is actually translating her own books into German, and now she was saying she's made something like $200,000 or $300,000 off of her books that have been translated. And Joe Conrath, who's also a big blogger and author and proponent of self-publishing, he's actually spent a lot of money translating his own books too. I won't talk too long about it, but the challenge with translating your books is I could pay Jen $10,000 to translate my book into Japanese. Well, she may not be that great at Japanese, and when she hands me that book, I might go, "This looks wonderful, it's all Japanese." And then someone reads it in Japanese and it's not even my story, it's, The Old Man and the Sea, and I didn't even know it because I can't speak Japanese. So really you're almost paying twice, because you have to pay someone to translate it, and then you have to pay someone else who speaks Japanese to read it and edit it. So it's difficult, because you could end up spending a lot of money, especially the way international laws work. If you hire someone overseas, you pretty much can never get that money back, because you can't always sue them unless you can find them. And that's difficult. I did the same thing. I actually hired a cover designer who lived in Croatia, and it did not go well for me. Several people, she had been working for a long time, but she stole my money, and there's nothing I can do because no one can find her. So, and that was a lot of money for me. But you live and learn. Don't hire people outside the United States because you have no legal recourse. Okay, so it's perfect timing. It's 3 o'clock. Let's just take a few minutes to just separate into maybe groups of 3 or 4. You can move your chairs if you want, or you can just kind of group up. But let's talk about what are your personal goals? What do you want to see out of your Nano novel or out of the novels you've had before? What do you want? Money could be a goal, which it is a goal, and then you have to decide where do you think you can make the most money. Is your goal to publish a lot of books? Is your goal just to get that one book in your hands and get it into Barnes & Noble? Is your goal to work with these big editors and be able to tell people you're published with Random House? What are your top 5 in priority order? Number 1 goal, your number 2 goal, and so on. And talk with your group about it. And then we're going to come back and talk about how that affects your Nano novel.
Could you real quick say something about what you do for marketing, since you are responsible for that? Like, what do you do to get buzz out there about your books?
I write more books. That's probably the number 1 thing that I can do, because, like I said, if I'm posting on Facebook or whatever about my book, if I've got another new book coming out and then another one 3 months from now, it keeps people interested. But I could talk 2 hours about marketing alone, and it still wouldn't even probably cover the tip of the iceberg. But let's wait until we get into the what do you need in order to self-publish, and I will promise that I will talk a little bit more about just some like quick and dirty tips of how to market your book once you get it out. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right, so let's just take, let's say, the next 5 minutes. Group up, talk about your goals, try to write them down. If you don't have a pen, I do have one extra here. Or you can borrow from someone else. And get that, and then we'll come back, but I'll also give you a break to go to the bathroom if you want. So I'll call you back in a few minutes. So as I was walking around, I heard a lot of people, it was kind of hard to come up with exactly five, but that's okay. Most of you had at least 2 or 3 really strong goals that you know that you're looking for. Almost everyone across the board said one of their goals was they want to connect with readers. That's why we write, isn't it? You want to share those stories. I mean, we're not doing it solely for ourselves. Now, some of us have to do it just to get the voices out of our heads, or they would drive us crazy. But you also want those people to connect with the characters too. I mean, we have those goals as writers. It's part of why we're driven to do what we do. So either way you go, traditional publishing or self-publishing, you're going to find a way to connect with readers. On the traditional side, though, the question is, can you get that contract? Because you're never going to connect with readers if you spend the next 15 years trying to get a contract and no one ever gives you one. So take that into consideration. You could give yourself a limit if you wanted to, or you could write 2 books. Say you've got an NaNoWriMo book from 2012 that maybe isn't quite edited yet, but you really believed in that book. And now you're going to write something new for 2013. Well, say December, you make it your goal. I'm going to edit my 2013 novel, and I'm going to self-publish that one, or whichever one. Get it out there, start self-publishing, then take January, February, edit the book from 2012, and start sending that to agents and publishers. There's no one that says you can't do both. So keep that in mind, those hybrid publishers, and you could throw them to the wind. If you've got a bucket full of nano novels or things that you've been working on, try both. Self-publish a couple of them, start querying agents, and who knows, by the time an agent really responds to you, you may already have a couple thousand sales self-publishing. And if you can tell your agent, hey, I've got these other couple books that have done really well and I've got really great reviews, they might be able to go to a publisher with that, and that publisher may even buy the books that you self-published already. You never know, but at least if you have that goal to really traditionally publish, it doesn't mean you can't also self-publish. Just because you self-publish doesn't mean, okay, I've now chosen a track and I can't go back. You can do both, so feel free to experiment with both of them. I actually, took that zombie novel that was called Pandemic back in 2009, and I did not self-publish that book in 2010 when I started, because I thought it was too good to self-publish. And I really did. I thought, this book belongs with a publisher. It's too good. I'm just going to write something else real quick that I can get out and see what happens. I'm going to throw one book up at self-publishing and see what happens. Well, number one mistake people make with self-publishing is they think they can put one book out, and that if it doesn't sell, they'll never sell, which isn't true. You really need 3 to 5 books before you even know if you're going to be successful. Well, I loved writing that so much, and here was Nano. I kept writing, and before I had really after 3 books, that's when I started making at least $3,000 a month off these books that were just supposed to be not good enough, and so I was like, wow, and so here this novel that I loved and wanted to traditionally submit just kind of languished on my hard drive for 3 years until I got it out, almost 4 years. So sometimes you may think one book is your better book and you're going to just throw these other ones out there, but you don't really know how, that connection with readers, you don't know how they're going to react, and the truth is publishers don't really know either. They're guessing the same way we are. So you may decide, hey, I'm going to hold this great one back and start querying agents, and in the meantime, I'm going to write this other series, and it may take off, and you may never want to traditionally publish because you're in love with self-publishing, which is what happened with me. So let's talk real quick about how does that choice affect your NaNoWriMo novel. Now that we're about to start, we're less than a month now before we start our Nano, how does that affect it, what we're learning here today? Well, if you know for sure this book, you want to try to go traditional with it, you got to know, number one, what are the rules? Because traditional publishing does have rules. You can't write something that You don't know if it, let's say we were talking about romantic suspense. Let's say you want to write a romantic suspense. Well, if you want to write for a specific line, like silhouette romantic suspense, Harlequin romantic suspense, or like Harlequin intrigue, if you know you want to write something for Harlequin like that, you got to follow very, very specific rules. They're not going to let you go really hard on the suspense side of it. It's got to be very romance. If you want to write for somebody like Simon & Schuster, I don't really know that much about romantic suspense, but let's say you want it to be more of a mainstream novel, not a romance novel. It just has a little bit of that hint of romance. Well, you got to know what they're expecting. You got to read some of the books that are put out by that publisher and figure out just how much romance and how much suspense. I have a friend who just recently self-published her books that she writes romantic suspense. Well, she tried for years and years to get a publisher, and every single publisher, no matter which side she went, suspense or romance, said if she was going to suspense publisher, they said there's way too much romance in this. You got to cut the sex, you got to cut the, all these sappy little scenes, and this character can't be so obviously in love with him right from the beginning. Let's make this more of a suspense novel. And they wanted to chop it all up into pieces and make it more suspense focused. So she said, okay, if it's got too much romance, I'm going to go over here and try to sell it to a romance publisher. Well, what do you think they said? Too much suspense. There's way too much suspense. You got to take out this train thing here. They can't go all the way to Siberia. We got to have them. There's got to be at least 3 more sex scenes here. And she didn't fit on either side. So if you know you want to traditionally publish, why not set yourself up for success now and say, okay, I want to write romantic suspense for a romance editor or for a romance publishing house. So I'm going to maybe take the rest of October and read a couple of romantic suspense that are actually from romance publishers, see what the balance looks like, and then plan your plot accordingly. Does that make sense? And you can apply that to any genre that you want. If you want to write romance, or if you want to write epic fantasy, you're not going to be able to sell a 50,000 word epic fantasy to anybody. You don't have to write the whole thing in November, but you better be writing at least 100 to 150 to 200,000 words, because they're not going to buy 50,000 words from you if you want to write epic fantasy. If you've been watching Game of Thrones and you're so in love with it, you just got to write it. Well, you got to know those rules. What length does it need to be? What kinds of things are they looking for? World building, that sort of thing. It's a lot more rules when it comes to a publisher. High concept is important really on both sides, but these days, with as difficult as it is to get into a publishing contract, you got to have a hook. I mean, something that's like, boom, one tagline, something very high concept. I wish I could come up with a great idea. If I had a good high concept, I would sell it. But something that you can just hear it in one single sentence and you go, wow, that's going to be really good. Like, a young boy who lives under the stairs finds out that he's a wizard and is going to wizarding school. I mean, wow, yeah, okay, that's very high concept. Or, a pirate on the high seas and, Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff. Like, you're going to hear these ideas and you're going to know they're amazing. Some of these things, even if you look at Jodi Picoult type books and stuff, they come out of headlines. Like, a couple's divorced and they have these embryos in frozen, and now they've got to decide who gets to use those. It's a very high concept idea for like a women's fiction type novel. So come up with something that really grabs readers just in one type of tagline. And if you can come up with that, even just that tagline, and you don't even have the whole plot before Nano, you're well on your way toward a book that might really catch an agent's eye. That high concept tagline is very important. So I would encourage you to start thinking about that. Now, I'm not saying it's not important self-publishing, because it is, but you can get away with taking longer to grow that story a little bit more with self-publishing, whereas with an agent, you're going to have to write a query letter that has that one tagline that makes them go, wow, okay, I want to read this, because they're reading thousands a week, and you got to stand out. So it is important before you start working. Clear genre. That's kind of what I was talking about with the romantic suspense. If you start your Nano experience and you know you want to traditionally publish and you're going, I don't know, it might kind of be a little bit vampires, but I think I'm going to put them in space and there might be some zombies, but there's going to be this really great romance because this guy falls in love with an alien. I mean, if it's like that, great. But if you want to traditionally publish that novel, you've got to rein it into a clear genre. It's got to be something that if someone says, hey, what genre do you write in, you know exactly what answer that is. Because if you say, it's sort of fantasy, sort of paranormal, sort of this, no publisher is going to publish that book. So you got to know. And it is important. It's just the rules. We already talked about length a little bit, but if, let's say you wanted to do something different with your Nano, and you wanted to say you wanted to set a goal of 75,000 words this year, and you're going to write 3 25,000-word short stories. A lot of publishers, unless you're looking at small indie publishers or like those digital-first imprints, they're not going to buy a 20,000-word short story from you. Like Simon Schuster doesn't just buy them and publish 25,000-word books. A lot of times they don't even publish 50,000-word books, especially depending on what genre you're in. So know where you stand with length. There's nothing wrong with saying, okay, I'm going to write this fantasy book and I'm going to give it the bones, and it's going to have a 50,000-word rough draft over Nano, but just be aware in your head, plot-wise, as you're writing it this month, that I'm probably going to have to flesh that out to 80,000 words, depending on what your genre is. And knowing where your novel fits is all part of this. Know where you fit with genre, know where you fit with the rules, with which publishers you might have a shot at, and you can go ahead and start kind of, if you pre-plan that, you're just going to be faster in getting it edited and getting it out to a publisher. Because if you haven't even given this any thought before you start Nano, and you just start writing away, but you don't have that focus, it doesn't mean your novel is just screwed forever. It just means that, hey, when you get to December, you've got a lot of editing to do, and you've got to go back and make these decisions anyway. So kind of might help you to have a little bit of an idea, if you want to traditionally publish, that you're going to have to fit more inside a box. Self-publishing, however, you do have a lot of freedom. It doesn't mean that you can just write that alien space opera zombie thing and expect it to be a big hit, because you still have to kind of know where it fits inside, like the Amazon store, for example. But you have a lot more freedom, because you don't have to get someone else's permission to get that book in front of readers. You may have to later go back and decide, where am I going to position it? That's more marketing than anything else. But you don't have to say, like even a publisher, when we talk about genre, Young Adult Paranormal back in 2009 when I was writing that zombie series was hot, hot, hot. Twilight, all those things that were so big and selling millions of copies. Today, not at all. Young Adult Paranormal is way down. They're not buying any of it. So if you're planning to go with a traditional publisher, that's something else to think about. If you've got this, great thing, you might want to look and see what's on the bestseller list these days, because new adult romance, which is that Trouble with Goodbye, it's the newer genre I've been writing in, is like the hot ticket item this year, the hot ticket genre, both for self-publishing and for traditional publishing. But if you write one of those, you're more likely to get a contract, because a lot of agents and editors are looking for them. A lot of agents and editors are looking for, I know I talk romance a lot for you guys in here, but I write a lot of romance, that's why I talk about it. But if you write a new adult contemporary romance, or even an adult contemporary romance, or adult erotic romance, you have a lot better chance of selling that right now than you do of selling a paranormal romance. So you might want to know where your novel fits, and kind of, I'm not saying write it just because it's selling. I'm just saying be aware of these things before you get started. But with self-publishing, it doesn't matter if YA Paranormal is on the downswing with publishers, because there's still a lot of readers reading it. My Peachful High Demon series is not heavy on the romance, but it is a YA Paranormal, and I sold $6,000 worth of books of that last month. It's still selling. It just might not be selling to a publisher. So if you're self-publishing, you can write what you want, and then afterward you can go back and try to figure out where it fits and how you want to market it. Think about writing a series, especially if you're self-publishing. If you go ahead and set yourself up now for Nano with a story, like say you're debating between 4 or 5 different plots, or maybe 2 different things that you're not sure which one you want to write. If you know you want to self-publish sometime in the next year or the next few months, go with the story that you are most excited about writing that also has a sequel to it. At least 1 or 2 or 3 more books that you could write in that series. If it's a standalone, it doesn't mean, like I said, it doesn't mean it won't do anything, but it's not going to do as well as if you have another book to follow that up with. And that's just pure and simple marketing right there. Series is a huge tool for you. When we were talking about that with a group back here in the back, a lot of people, and even some of the readers in this group or in this room, were telling me, if you see that a series has 2 books out, and you've only got 1 that 2 that you can read now, a lot of people don't pick those up yet. A standalone book, maybe if you're going to the beach and you just wanted to read this 1 book. If you see, oh my gosh, there's 6 books in this series and you're an avid reader, you pick those up because you want to stay in that world for 6 books, especially in I call it the Netflix world. I don't ever watch anything on TV anymore, but man, I will watch an entire 9 seasons of X-Files back to back to back to back to back because I love it. I want to live in that world. I'm actually only on season 8 of X-Files because it takes forever. But it's good, but man, there's like 30 episodes each, they're all an hour long, and 9 seasons, it's a long series. But,
the last season wasn't that great.
Oh, don't tell me that. No!
It is worth watching.
It is worth. Yeah, you gotta finish it out, right?
The last season, 8 seasons was.
Well, recently I watched Revenge, and they've got 2 seasons up on Netflix, but that first season is really good, and it's one of those really great to watch for storytelling because it's like everyone ups the stakes and ends on a cliffhanger, so it's like really interesting to see how that story is told. And I love revenge stories anyway. Well, I binged on that series. It's like 12 episodes or 20 episodes, and I watched them all back to back to back to back. While I have 2 monitors on my computer, so I watch that, but I'm also like writing my blog posts and doing work because that's something you'll learn if you self-publish is you work 24 hours a day because you just want more. But yeah, I multitask, so I'm not just lazy binging on TV, I promise. I did my nails last night while watching Desperate Housewives. You always gotta multitask. But people are used now to being able to binge. They don't want to wait for that cliffhanger to be resolved. They want to binge on the whole series. So once you finish 3 to 4 to 5 books, you're going to get a lot more sales. So not only do you want to plan your Nano something that you can write in a series, but something that you're excited enough about that you could see yourself living in that world to write 3 or more books in. So something to think about. If it's kind of like, well, new adult's selling really hot right now, but I hate writing romance. Don't write that for your Nano novel just because it's hot. Find something that really excites you because this is going to be something you might spend the next year or 3 years of your life writing. So think about that as series-wise. You can also sell a series to a traditional publisher because they love those, but just be aware if you're going to write a 6-book series, you're going to be writing that for the next 6 years of your life. Yes?
So where does anticipation fit that? In the sense that you have...
From the readers?
Well, yeah, you're talking about binge reading or watching or whatever, but there's also there's an anticipation waiting for another book to come out. You don't want to pull a George R.R. Martin and take 6 years to get. And
then tell your fans you're never going to write it, and then suddenly it's HBO, and now you have to write it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like there's a little bit of is there in the sense that you e-publish because you have this month that you have on your new author list or whatever it is that you said that Amazon, is there a sense that you would wait 3 or 4 months between publishing things or not?
Did you have an answer?
I did. I promise. It's going to depend on what you want to do with your career. So if you're trying to slowly build a large fan base, you can wait a little bit. Let people read the first one. Put out the second one. Let them read it. Go back. Let more people be like, oh, new book. Go back, read the first one. You can interact more with your fans. You're not doing as much hardcore marketing on a day-to-day basis. But you have to remember that you're not getting any push from publishers when you're self-publishing. So you're getting no marketing help from them at all, which you don't most of the time anyway, but you can. So what a lot of people do, or what one of the best ideas I've heard, is you write your first 3, and you put out 1, 2, 3. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Put them out right away, and then you can take a break.
They've got those first 3. There's a lot to read. There's a world. They can interact. They can build a fan base. You can interact with them on your web page. And then they know there's another book coming because you told them so. Release an excerpt in that last one that says, this is from the new book. This is the first 5 pages of the new book. They know it's coming. Then you can start to build your anticipation. But with self-publishing, it's better to have a backlist.
It is, and that is very true. The anticipation thing you're talking about is interesting too, because, and I'll just tell you just a little bit about my own experience. I didn't have a backlist, so I was just writing books quickly. Like I said, I had October, December, February, and then I didn't have another book out till July, and then I got pregnant and didn't have another book out till January, and then the last book of the series I did not get out until December. So I feel like what saved me in my career was having those first 3 fast releases. And a lot of indies saw that, and so that's why that's kind of a lot of the wisdom that's out there now is get those books out as quickly as you can, especially in the beginning. There are some indie authors who will tell you, hold them. Write all 3 of them, don't publish one until you've got at least 2 or 3, then you can publish them quickly. There are other indie authors who will tell you, why would you hold a book back? At least even if you've only got 50 new people, you've got it. The truth is you never really know. That's part of the decision-making process. It has worked extremely well for some people to hold those books and go, go, go. Some people say I'm going to hold them and then they never finish another one. So it's kind of all up to you personally. I will say this, and I will get to you in just a second. I was talking over here about a mailing list. A mailing list is a huge marketing thing. In the back of your book, when you self-publish, you need to. This is one of those things that I will say everyone should do. Sign up for some company like Constant Contact or MailChimp has a free one up to 2,000 people. And start a mailing list. Even if you only get 10 people subscribed in the first 10 months, it doesn't matter. At the end of your book, you have a link that says, want to read more by Sarra Cannon? Sign up for my mailing list. You start to collect those names right from day 1. Then when you have a new book out, you email those people and you say, hey, I have a new book out. And even if it's 10 guaranteed sales, it's 10. And that's better than nothing, right? Well, when you've got a book coming out every month, people are much less likely to sign up for your mailing list because they don't need to be reminded that you're going to come out with a book every 6 months from now. They feel like, oh, I'm on her Facebook page. She's always got a new book out. I'm just going to always keep looking for Sarra Cannon's books. Now, it won't matter if I continue that process of every month I've got a new book out. But if I ever have to take a break, I might lose a lot of those readers because they haven't signed up for that list. I'm just saying keep it in mind. I got the most signups to my mailing list during that year between January and December because people read all the way through the series and they went, oh, it's only book 5, there's a new one coming. I got to sign up because I have no idea when that next book is coming out. If you come out with a new book on the 20th of every month, people don't have incentive to sign up for that next book. I will also just, on a kind of flipping it to the anticipation side of things, cliffhangers can be your friend. A lot of people will say, I hate cliffhangers, but then why does every TV show ever end on a cliffhanger? People love them. They want to see that last minute twist and they go, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? So if you're writing a series that's not, nobody wants a cliffhanger on a romance, at least not most people. They want, know your genre. But like with the YA paranormal, oh my gosh, he's a demon? What? I got to read the next book. And if there is no next book yet, they're going to click and they're going to sign up for my mailing list. Even if they know I have a book coming out in 2 months, maybe, they want to know as soon as that book hits Amazon. So you can build anticipation into your novel, and it will be a great tool for you as an indie. But I like Kaylee's advice, too, about fast releases in the beginning is a great way to go. So if you do have a series already going or you have a backlist, consider once you finish this Nano, editing some of those that you can get out faster just so you can have them out. Backlist in a series is like ×2 of just having a backlist, if that makes sense. Yes, getting 3 standalone books out could be great, but 3 books in a series really fast is like money, okay? Okay, so niche markets, I was kind of talking about that. If we were discussing inspirational romance just as an example, that's more of a niche market. There's not really, you don't see all over the bestseller list. There's this great trend. Oh, I forgot you. I'm sorry. I'll go back.
Oh, it was just the even in traditional publishing, you see authors moving up their schedule now. Like Janet Ivanovich used to only write her Stephanie Plum series every summer it came out.
Right.
But then she started going between the numbers novels, so that the anticipation used to be people would wait a year, but it got down to six months. And she's doing between the numbers. And then it got even shorter. She was doing the holiday themed one. So there was between the numbers that came out every 6 months, and then it was like holidays in between. So even traditional anticipation cycles seem to be getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
And part of that is a result of indie publishing, that we've been able to do it so fast that now publishers have to stay alive. No. No, I don't really mean that, but you know, it ups the pressure for the traditionally published authors as well. But it also shows that now readers maybe have a little bit less patience. So you got to keep, it's all things you got to keep in mind. It's an ever evolving change. Now, I'll also say this: when you hear someone like, if I know there's some people in here who took my class. I think there's 2 or 3 people who took my class on self-publishing I taught in January. Well, guess what? Algorithms changed at Amazon. That's their mathematical secret juju sauce equation that tells, you know, this many sales at this price equals your number 20 on the bestseller list kind of thing. And nobody really knows exactly. People make guesses about how that mathematics works. They change it. It used to be, and believe me, indies game the system as much as they can. So it used to be that if you could sell a ton of books all in the same hour, you could jump way up into the number 1 slot. So people would send out their mailing list and say, I want everyone to buy the book at 6 p.m. tonight, Eastern time. And they would have like 1,000 sales all at once. And Amazon would go, wow, this book's amazing, number 1. And then they wouldn't have any sales or like 10 sales or 100 sales every hour from then on, but it would be what we call sticky. So it would slowly decline, but you've got all these eyes on it, which kind of perpetuate the sales because you're on the bestseller list. Well, Amazon caught on that, hey, these aren't necessarily books that all these thousands of people want to read. It's just this 1,000 crazy fans that wanted to read it and help the author. And so now they take into account like what people are saying is they take into account about the first 3 days worth of sales. So you can't just have that 1,000 in an hour. They want to see consistently, 10 to 20 to 30 to 100 every hour for 3 days. And that kicks in a new algorithm that then sends out a blast email to everyone that says, hey, you've read Sarra Cannon's books before. She's got a new book out. So it's kind of like a built-in mailing list. If you just had that one burst of sales, it's not doing what it used to do. So what worked back in January may not work anymore. So coming out with those fast releases once a month next year may not be enough. Maybe now you need a new release every 10 days. Or maybe they've changed it and now they're going to keep you sticky for 60 days, so it would be smarter to wait 2 months. So I'm not trying to overwhelm you because it does seem like, oh my gosh, how would I keep up with it? Just like I go to a place called K-Boards, which is Kindle Boards. You can write that down if you want to. It's just K and then Boards, BOARDS.com. And on there they have a place called the Writers Cafe, and it's where a lot of indie writers gather to talk about this kind of things. Hey, algorithms changed. Hey, this changed. I think there's also a couple of loops like Yahoo loops and things like that where you can become active and kind of get information from people, or you can email me or meet up with other writers on Twitter or whatever, and you can discuss some of the changes. So it's not that overwhelming. It's just you have to know strategies change. So let's talk what happens after Nano. Once you've plotted your novel or your series and you've got it finished, if you go traditional, here's the steps you need to take. You got to edit that novel within an inch of its life. If you need a 75,000 word book, you're going to have to add to it. You're going to have to edit it. You can hire someone. This is someone asked in the back, when do you send it to your beta readers? When do you send it to your critique groups? Well, it depends on your own process. My process, when I'm first writing my very rough draft, I will put things, I write sort of, you've heard people are pantsers and some people are plotters. I'm a puzzler, which sounds like the Riddler or something. I think I need like a cool pink outfit with a puzzle on it or something. But I'm a puzzler, and what that means is I write this scene, and then I'm like, oh, but I've got this scene in my head where they go fishing later, and so I'm going to write that scene, which is why Scrivener is really great for me. But I'll write different scenes, and then I go back and fill them in, and I'll even, in my rough draft, I'll have things that say, go back and make this make sense later. or go back and add a scene. You know, I'll just write XX because that's my cue when I go back and find and replace XX, and then I'll say, maybe a scene here where she meets her dad for the first time. And that's just all I've got in my rough draft. So that's just my process. Some people write chapter 1, edit chapter 1, and when chapter 1's done and edited, they never touch it again. It depends on your personal process. If I sent my rough draft to my critique group or my beta readers, they would go, I don't even know what this story is about. Her name's Justine in chapter 1, and it's, you know, Trina in chapter 12, and she never met her father, and then over here she's like best friends with them and grew up with them. It changes all the time, and I'm constantly making notes, so it wouldn't make sense. So it kind of depends on your own process. If your nano novel is really good and you write really rough or really clean rough drafts, you could start sending those chapter by chapter to your critique group as soon as Nano's over, or during Nano if you wanted to. I have to at least go through one complete edit, get the story where it seems at least a little bit cohesive, all the chapters are filled in. That's when I started sending it to my critique group, and then they would start giving me comments, and then I would go and edit again after that. If you're traditionally publishing, you probably don't need to hire an editor. Just have your friends read. Have your critique group read if you have one. If you don't have one, you might be able to meet one in this room or during your Nano experience, ask people. Have your husband, your wife, your friends, somebody read it. If only just to proofread it or give you ideas that, hey, this doesn't make sense. I don't understand why she did this here. Mark it, edit it again. Once you feel like that book is as good as it can be, you're probably going to want to write a query letter, which is, you can find, just Google how to write a query letter and you'll figure it out. We could talk about it forever. But it's basically a one-page letter that just is to an agent, usually, that says, here's what my story is about, here's my credentials, or, you know, here's a little bit about me. I'm seeking representation. And you can email that. Most of them take it through email, usually without any piece of your manuscript. It's usually just that one page, and you send it off, and they'll get back to you or they won't. Some agents do, some agents never respond, which is infuriating. But some of them get back to you in 6 months to say, no, I'm not interested in your novel. And I've actually heard of several people that got a query letter response back several months after they had self-published their book and sold 10,000 copies of it, that said, no, I'm not interested in this. I don't think it's a very commercial novel. And they were like, booyah, I told you 10,000 copies of it. Or, yes, I am interested in this. Please send it. And you say, oh, I already self-published this, you know. But some of them do get back within 30 days. So just check their website, check for, you know, stuff like that. Look for an agent, see who you want to query to. I personally would recommend, like, maybe coming up with lists of, like, here's my top 10, and you can call them the A list. Send those out, wait till you get a few answers, because you might get a few agents that say, this is really good, but I'm not sure it's enough romance in this romantic suspense. Then you can edit it again before you send out to your B list, if that makes sense. So you can kind of edit as you go, but send out to your top list maybe first and then go. But again, I didn't really spend a lot of time. I submitted to one agent. So I'm not an authority on this subject. And then you're going to want to query agents or research publishers who accept what they call unsolicited, which means they didn't ask for your manuscript. If it's solicited manuscripts only, that means that an agent for you has come to them and said, I'm interested in reading this book. You know, here's this book my client has, and they've said, okay, I want to see pages. That's when they solicit it. Most editors at the Big Six, the Big Five, you can't just email them and say, hey, do you want to take a look at my book? They won't respond to you. They only talk to agents. So be aware of those relationships and what all you need to do to get your book ready to go. It needs to really be, you know, nice. You know, a lot of agents and editors have a very specific way they want your book formatted, like double space and all that. So make sure you do your research and you know you've got it in a nice, clean format, and it's ready to go. If somebody asks for it, you can send it today. Don't start querying until that novel is done. Because what if that agent says, I want to see the full manuscript tomorrow, and your book is still rough draft nano? Ah! You will be stressed and downing Red Bulls and probably not get that contract because it's not going to be good enough. If you're self-publishing, same process with the editing. Like you said, because you think I'm a good storyteller, right? Well, I would never put a rough draft out there just because I can. And some people do. Don't do that, guys. Just thinking that, oh, if I get 20 books out really fast and I don't edit them, I'm going to be amazingly popular. It's not just about quantity. In the early days of self-publishing, I will tell you, there were some people who made it very successful, who really, they were good writers, but they had a lot of typos in their books. They had a lot of, the presentation wasn't great, and it really wasn't very well edited. But because they were the only books out there at 99 cents, they still sold a lot of copies, purely off of price point, and they told really good stories. It's a lot more competitive now than it was back then. You've got to have the whole package. It needs to look and be just like a traditionally published book. So don't, still go through your editing process. Send it to your beta readers. Beta readers are more like when the book is done and you're almost ready to publish it, you send it to a few people. It could be people you met on Facebook. It could be other writers. I like to use people who aren't writers for beta reading because they're better at reading it as readers rather than, like writers, you know, when we read stuff, we're always judging it based on our own voice, or don't we? I mean, you know, you judge it like, oh, I would have never written her like that. Or, you know, whatever. Or you kind of are putting your own voice into it. Or you see somebody writes with choppy sentences. That's not the way you write. Okay? That doesn't mean the readers won't like that. You know, get a reader for your beta reader. So you could do, your process could be critique group first. Then once you feel like it's really solid, send out to a few beta readers. I actually like to format my novel first because I'll tell you in a minute that when you upload to like Amazon, it has to be in a specific format. You can upload a document, like just a doc, but it's better if you upload like an EPUB. And I like to actually send my readers the formatted book so that then I don't have to comb it myself. They can let me know, hey, there's a weird space on this page, or you know, they point out the errors for you, so it kind of does double duty. If you're someone, this is kind of like know your own strengths, but if you're someone who just, like, maybe you're dyslexic, maybe you have a real hard time with certain types of voice or emotion, if you know you've got certain kinds of problems, line up professional editors if you need to. You can find, like my proofreader charges $1 per 1,000 words. So if I have a 50,000 word novel, it's $50 for her to proofread. And she does a little bit of story checking type things, like if her outfit was green over here and it's suddenly a blue dress, she will check that. But she's not going to tell me, she's not going to try to fix my sentences. Like, I don't know, copy editing is a little bit different. When someone's copy editing, or if they're content editing, they're going to charge you a lot more money. I have my friend Karen, she does a copy editor, and she charges maybe more like $3 per 1,000 words. So it gets a lot more expensive, but there are some people out there who are going to charge you $3,000 and $4,000 to copy edit your book. So my advice would be, unless you absolutely just have to have that $3,000 editor, don't spend that kind of money. There's other ways. Getting your peers to read your books, and if you know, if there ends up being a story thing that wasn't as amazing as it could have been, I think it's better not to spend the 3,000 words. And I know people want to throw stones at me for saying stuff like that, but it's true. I mean, you're going to be a better writer the more you write. So I feel like I'm on a sticky subject there, but know your weaknesses, but don't put so much money into it that you're never going to be able to make that money back until you, because if you spend $3,000 on your first book, you got to spend $3,000 on the next one, and before you've even started making money, you've spent 10 grand. Don't do that. Do not do that. You can find better editors. You can find people starting out. You can find college students who will read through it for a lot cheaper than that. So find people that, and then once you're making $100,000 a month or whatever, then you can go back, your bucket's full of money or whatever, then you can go back and hire more expensive people. Finding a cover artist, unless, let me tell you guys, it is easy to pick out covers that were homemade, unless you are just really great at it. If your response is, you know what, I'm going to try to learn how to use Photoshop this month and put my own cover together, you're already way behind. If you're not someone who knows how to use Photoshop and knows the tools, you're probably not a good candidate for coming up with your own cover. If you do make your own cover, run it by people who you know will tell you the truth. Send it to me. I'll tell you the truth. You cannot publish it with that cover. Because Covers are hugely important. In a world where there are thousands of books being uploaded every month to Amazon and to these various vendors, you've got to have a cover that's going to stand out. So find a good cover artist. My cover artist for the Demon series was $60 to $80 a cover. It's not a lot of money. And like I said, pre-made covers, you can find some $10, $15, $20, $30 sometimes, and they're really good covers. So start with that, and then once you make more money, you can start, adding on to that. And I've actually got a resource list that has a bunch of cover designers, editors, proofreaders, formatters, everything on it. So if you take one of my cards, or actually on the back where it says sarracannon.com, there's a contact me tab there. If you email me and say, hey, can I get one of those resource lists, I will send it to you. It's in a Google Doc. And it has tabs along the bottom for which people. And I've got, 20, 30 people on each list. So you can have that for free. Set up an online presence. If you're someone who is like a Luddite and you just never go online ever and you are scared of technology, pick one place. Start a blog. Get on Facebook is probably the best one because most of us are already on Facebook and there's a lot of reader interaction. Start a Facebook fan page, something. At least have one place where you're online and readers can find you. Set up your mailing list, which I didn't put that there, but that's kind of like an online presence type thing. Set up your mailing list. Set up one place readers can come to find out about you. I personally set up everything. Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Pinterest, and it's a lot to manage, but it's worth it because I have, my readers that find me on Twitter are on Facebook. So as you grow, but it's taken me 3 years to do that. So if you're not already there and you don't know how to use it, don't get overwhelmed. Just add to it as you go. It's fine just to have one place. If you're going to use a pen name, go ahead during Nano and start thinking about what your pen name is going to be. My name is really Sarah Bittman. Sarra Cannon is my maiden name. But I used my maiden name because I thought Cannon was a little bit easier than Bittman because people always spell it wrong. And I just liked Cannon better. It's my name. I'm using it. So if you're going to use Sarra Cannon, you set up a Facebook page that uses Sarra Cannon. Make sure you've got those things in place so you can already be telling people about your book. Consider setting up a business. I'm not going to go into a bunch of this, but you can feel free to ask me questions later about it. I set up an LLC and then did an S-Corp election on that. I'm not an accountant, so I'm not giving necessarily advice. I'm just telling you what I did. My accountant told me once you start making more than $30,000 a year, an LLC is with an S-Corp election is a better way to go. So you might want to talk to an accountant because it can save you a lot of money without getting taxed twice on that money because you pay self-employment tax and then you also pay your own income tax. If you're an S-Corp, you can actually get dividends, which aren't taxed. So there are some advantages there to setting up the business. Now, if you aren't sure, you're like, I don't know if I'm going to be very good at self-publishing, or I might only put 1 or 2 books out, and what if I never make any money? You might not want to spend the couple $100s it takes to set up an LLC yet. That's okay. Just start out, and it'll just say, Sarra Cannon published her own book. My say Dead River Books is I've set up a company, but readers don't care. They don't care if you're self-published or if you have a publishing name. Don't worry about setting it up. The only place I would say it matters is when you have like a business already set up, you get a tax ID number, that then your money comes through that. You can change that tax ID number everywhere except Barnes & Noble. So if you set up your Barnes & Noble account and you set it up with your Social Security number, it will be your Social Security number forevermore. It's the only place it matters. It's okay, your accountant can deal with it or you can deal with it on your taxes. You just kind of have to juggle things a little bit. Okay, so pull out. I knew we have a lot to talk about, so I won't, it's already 3, so I'm just going to point this out. That's what I meant. It's already 4. We've already been here for 12 hours. On this sheet, I put together a list for you of what you need to gather before you self-publish. This could kind of be a checklist for you because while you're writing your Nano novel, if you want to get this novel out before the big Christmas season when everyone gets brand new Kindles and starts downloading a bunch of books, you can go ahead and start working on some of this stuff. Like you can already get your cover made and all that stuff. But this is a list of all the things that you need to have before you can self-publish. If it has a little asterisk by it, it's an optional thing. Like You don't have to have your dedication written because you don't have to put a dedication in your book. But I do like to put a dedication because I want to, thank the people that are important to me. Another thing is like acknowledgments. You don't have to put acknowledgments in there, but it's something to think about if you do want to write out your acknowledgments. You need to have all that done before you put it all into an ebook. So some of this list is things that you'll put inside your formatted book. Some of it is things that you'll put into the website as you upload. But just a basic list of where you can self-publish. And you can find this on my website, so you don't have to write it down. But Amazon is the #1. That's where the majority of ebooks are sold. It's the #1 place most people make their money. And they have a publishing portal called KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. And these are all free to do. You just set up an account. You can use your current Amazon account to set it up. And it says add a book. And you click it. And then it's super easy. It says, what's the title of your book? Is it part of a series? What's the title of that series? Do you have an ISBN? I talk about it in here. You don't have to have an ISBN if you don't want to put one out. For print books you do, but not for ebooks. You don't have to have an ISBN. And it'll ask you a series of questions. What's your blurb? What's your description of your book? Which is just like that back cover blurb. And it goes through all those questions. If you go to my website, there is a tab that says Indie Writer Resources. You click on that, and then at the top it has a bunch of different things. One of them is self-pub guides. If you click there, you will see a list of self-pub guides for most of these vendors where I've actually gone through with screenshots and shown you every box you have to fill out and what you need to say there. So if you have any questions, I have made it super, super easy. Some of them might have changed a little bit, like the way their website looks, but the questions are all the same. So that would give you a quick walkthrough. It takes me maybe 20 minutes to fill out all of those forms across the board. And what I like to do is have all that information. Like I'll open a Word doc or a Google Doc, and I'll put my blurb, my title, my series title. So then all I have to do is copy, paste it, click publish, and go. You upload your cover separately, so you'll need to have a cover file. Some places there's rules about what size that needs to be. Like you can't have a cover that's like this long and only this tall. They have rules about how it needs to look. It needs to look kind of like a book. And it can't be like a 2 kilobyte file. It needs to be so big, but it can't be like 20 gigabytes either. So follow, basic rules with that, and your cover artist will know. And then you've got to have a file that can be uploaded. Most places you can do a doc, so just your Word doc, but I wouldn't recommend it. Now what most people are going with is an EPUB, and you can get that formatted for you, or I also have some walkthrough stuff on my website about how to format an EPUB. So me, I get overwhelmed when people start talking about formatting, so I just have my husband do it. And so now he started his own business that I'll plug here, that if you're interested in having him format your ebooks, it's $30. And he also does the Create Space books for like $50. So that makes it easy. You can send it off to someone else and you don't have to worry about it. Another place you can get your books on is Barnes & Noble, which their publishing platform is called Nook Press. So I think it's just nookpress.com. So same thing, same process. An account, upload your book. At all of these places, they'll have a dashboard that has a list of your books, and then you can check your sales every single day, every hour. They're constantly reporting them to you. So you always know what your royalties are going to be for that month. Kobo Books is another one, and their platform is called Kobo Writing Life. There's links to these on my website, but I can't remember if it's like kobo.writinglife.com something. iTunes or iBooks is another place you can upload. It's a little bit more of a headache there because you have to, like I said, you have to have a Mac, or you have to rent time called Mac in Cloud. It's a little bit more confusing, so we don't have time to talk about it now. But know that you can get your books into the iTunes store. There you do have to have an ISBN unless it's a free book. If you're charging for the book, you have to have an ISBN. There are ways to get free ISBNs, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Another place to upload is the Google Play Store. It's also a little bit of a headache. Most people I know are not in the Google Play Store, but it is an option. I think it will probably grow because it's Google and they own the world. And then finally, you've got Smashwords, which if you took one of my coupons or one of my bookmarks, on the back there's just a handwritten code. If you go to smashwords.com, just like it sounds, Smashwords, you can type in Trouble with Goodbye, and when you go to purchase it, you put in that coupon, and it'll give you a free download of that book. And you can download it in PDF, doc, a lot of different, they'll give you a lot of options. But what happens when you go through Smashwords is you upload a doc that's formatted exactly the way they want it, and then they go through this meat grinder process where they take that doc, that's what they call it, it's not my word for it. I probably would have a nastier name for it. But they take that doc and then they spit it out in a Mobi and EPUB and all the various types of formats you could ever want, and they will actually distribute that book for you to all the other stores. But my advice to you is don't go through Smashwords to distribute to anywhere else except for Smashwords, because there's many reasons. Royalties are delayed, they mess things up, the formatting's not as clean. If you want to change your price, I could go on Amazon, change my price, and it's live in the store in 20 minutes. If I change it on Smashwords, it could be 6 weeks before they change my price. So if you're trying to run a temporary sale, you're losing your advantage. The only place that, besides like a couple library things that they have at Smashwords, which I would actually use the library ones too, like Overdrive and some of the others, is Sony. You can't get into the Sony store except through Smashwords. So if you want to distribute there, you can. But be aware, if I change my price to 99 cents on Amazon, I can't change it on Sony probably for 6 weeks because it's got to go through that whole process. So just be aware of those limitations. Smashwords is great because you can give out coupons like I just did. You can't do that on Amazon. So if you want to give free books away, it's a great thing to do. At Amazon, free books, we were talking about marketing ideas. Having the first book in a series free is a huge marketing tool. It's like one of the biggest ones out there. It's what I do with my series. I personally wouldn't do it until you have at least 3 books out in a series, and then set that first one free, and it'll take off like wildfire. And there's a lot of places online you can, like Facebook pages, you can go and say, hey, I've got this free book, and they'll repost it for you. So it's kind of like free marketing, or you can pay for ads to do it. And you can't set your book directly free at most places, but you can set it free on Smashwords, and there's little tricks to go about it. So like I can distribute my book to Barnes & Noble through Smashwords, and it'll go free. And then Amazon has these little fingers that crawl the web and say, hey, it's free on Barnes & Noble, we should set it free here. And then they price match. So it's kind of like gaming the system a little bit, but that's what we do. And so if you need to know more about that as you get into it, we were talking about maybe doing a Google Hangout like in January or December. I'm moving to South Carolina, but we could do a Google Hangout maybe, and we could talk about some of the more marketing aspects of it, because there's just obviously not time to do everything you would need to know. But this list will get you started about what you need to do, where to self-publish. Those links are on my site. Also, gathering your team, you can get those resources from that resource list that I'm going to give to you for free if you email me. And you can start gathering, like look at these cover designer websites, see who you want to use. You can go ahead and purchase your pre-made cover and put it up on your Nano signature, everything. This is, again, is my website. These are all my books, and you guys actually are the first to see this season for Hope, because I just got it yesterday, and it hasn't been revealed yet, the 18th. But this series on the right is my new adult series, which is like a new genre of college-age romances. I have 3 books. The Christmas book is coming out November 1st. Then over here is that zombie book that hasn't sold that great, and I'm actually changing that cover. But that's only the first in probably a 6-book series. And then at the bottom is my main selling series, which is the Peachville High Demons series. And the first book is free. It's called Beautiful Demons. You can download it anywhere. And that series is complete, but I have a novella coming out from the male love interest point of view this month. And then I'm actually starting a 2nd series based on these same characters starting next year. So those are my 9 books plus one that's coming out in November. And I would love for you guys to download them and give feedback or reviews if you get a chance. But if there's any other questions, I know we've run over, so I apologize for keeping you, but I'll be glad to stay and talk to anybody that has extra questions. I'm always available through email. I do have a small child, and I work full-time as a writer, and we're moving, so my life is a little hectic, but I will do everything I can to answer your questions if you have any, because I know It's overwhelming, but you can do it. Money-wise, my very first year that I self-published, I made almost $50,000 that first year, and that's unheard of for someone their first year not self-publishing, but traditionally publishing. That's really would be almost impossible to write a book and then the following year you make $50,000 on it. Self-publishing is so much better and so much easier. Not everybody makes 50 grand a month, but if you put those books out quickly, you've got a lot better shot at it than anyone ever has before. My second year I made 80,000. This year I've made over 100. And it's just a matter of, I've only put out 3 books a year. It's not like I'm putting out a book a month. I'm not making $1 million yet either, but maybe next year. You never know. But you can make enough money to quit your day job your very first year. And that's a huge change from something most people were ever able to do with traditional publishing. Even 10 years down the road, some people still working their full-time jobs. So if your goal is to quit your job, which I know some of you love your jobs, and that's great, but a lot of us would love to write full-time. Self-publishing is hands down the easiest and the fastest way to get there. So if you have questions, I'm definitely here for you, and I really appreciate everybody coming out today. So thank you.